Welcome back to On the Road of Recovery. We're here with Kim from Fairborn. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Thanks so much for coming out. So, getting started, can you start with sharing a bit about how your life was impacted by your loved one's active addiction?
Um, I had three kids. My husband and I were in ministry, and he became very, very ill. He had a childhood disease, but ended up with two liver and one kidney transplant, and it was a lot of hospitalizations and everything. And so my kids started. We were a very normal family. Had three great kids, a beautiful house, all of it. And things just started to spiral when he got sick. Well, he ended up passing away. And my youngest son was 6, and my middle son was 8, and my daughter was 13. And shortly after that, my middle son he was 8 and had just turned 9, and he started with really severe panic attacks, separation anxiety, all of it, because him and my daughter were with their dad in the hospital when he passed. My youngest one, my mother had. And so, right after that, my daughter was involved in the youth group at the church we were involved in, and she had a horrific car accident. She was a passenger in the back seat of a car on the way home from a function, and she died at the scene. She had broken bone. I mean, horrific. I mean, she tore her carotid arteries. She had a severe stroke the night of it, and she was in the hospital, was in a wheelchair, and she had so many broken bones and everything that they decided to introduce, which wasn't even on the market basically yet, but they introduced Oxycontin to her. And so, at the age of 13, so 14 surgeries, 15, 16, by the age of 16, she was highly addicted to pain meds, every kind, everything. She had tried to commit suicide also because she just couldn't handle all that she was going through. And my middle son was they were very close in age. I protected my younger son because he was a lot smaller, but my middle son just started acting out. He was hospitalized for his anxiety, depression, all of this at the age of 10. And he was in the hospital almost 2 weeks, and he had already tried to commit suicide also. And so it was just like a whole series of spirals. And so he decided by the age of 12, he was just partying and doing drugs and drinking and marijuana and all of it. Well, then here comes my youngest son, and he starts coming up, and they were almost 2 years apart. And so my youngest son started seeing it. Hence, my youngest son was a little bit later, but I ended up with 3 full-blown addicts, and my youngest one was an alcoholic and a crack cocaine, and my middle son was an active heroin user, and my daughter was pain and nerve pills.
Okay.
So
that sounds really chaotic.
It was horrible.
And how did you survive during that period of time?
A lot of lonely times, because this was in the early 2000s. Nothing like recovery was back then is it like it is now. I did a lot of it in silence. Churches didn't understand. My family tried to help, but it was all 3 of them, and nothing I tried, nothing I did. No, I was embarrassed. I was humiliated. I was constantly back and forth in the hospital. There were cops at our house. I had them on speed dial. Police. I had both my boys were in jail together, and my daughter was in prison all at the same time. And it was all from active drug use. And it was a very, very lonely route to take. I was a single mother. And what guy really wanted to date me, when, number one, I had 3 kids, but I had 3 kids in active addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a life of just destruction. I never knew from one day to the next what was going to happen. The police in every place I lived ended up basically knowing who we were. And if I didn't have probation officers at my house, I had sheriffs, I had police, I had ambulances. We had 8 overdoses with all 3 of my kids. I held them with nothing, no pulse, no nothing, no breath sounds, Narcan after Narcan after Narcan after Narcan. And it was just a horrible time for what I am called the family that is affected by addicts and addiction.
So, how did you manage to get through?
A lot of prayer. I have been raised in church my whole life. A lot of crying out to God. I was embarrassed to talk to people. I was shunned by a lot of people, like we were contagious, like we had the flu. And so several people that tried to help me, they couldn't. And so they would feel helpless and they would leave. It was just, I wish I had the magic answer of how I got through it, because it was 21 years of nonstop, almost. And if one would get clean for a short amount of time, the other one would start severe. And the thing, I tell people that the time I slept and I had peace was the time that both of my boys were in jail together and my daughter was in prison. That was the time that I could rest. I knew I wasn't going to get a phone call. I knew that somebody was not going to find them dead somewhere. I knew that somebody wasn't being robbed. Somebody wasn't driving drunk. I knew at that time I could sleep. And 9 years, almost 9 years down the road, I met a wonderful man who was pastoring at the time. And he took me and my children the way we were, but he honestly had no clue exactly how destructive and broken we were, to the point that the churches didn't want us in there anymore to pastor either. So once again, the road of loneliness continued. So
How did that then affect your marriage?
it went in the toilet. It did. Sorry, I probably shouldn't have said
That's
that,
okay.
but it almost destroyed it. They were pawning everything we had. It went into financial ruin. Almost losing my job because I had health issues. I ended up with severe heart issues. And the doctor looked at me, he said, you got a choice. He said, you've either got to make some decisions or you're going to die. And so I was dying along with my kids and along with my marriage because of the devastation of it.
So, which one of your kids really turned the corner first? Who found their way into recovery first?
My youngest son ended up going to Christopher House.
Okay.
And graduated from there. And he actually probably started the turn. My daughter tried at different times, but with her health issues, it just wouldn't work. But he actually started it. And my middle son, about a year later, he had gone through a program here at the Greene County Greenleaf and walked right out, and in 2 weeks was using again. And he was in there like for 9 months.
Wow.
And it's nothing against that program. What it is he just
didn't work that time.
No, and he went back to the same, life and the friends, and he tried to separate, but he had to have a job. And so when you have a job where people party and stuff, and they give you tools, but it ultimately would have been his decision. Him losing his son, probably, really, he had lost everything. We had locked him out of the house, and he kept breaking into our house. Our last house was surrounded time after time with police. He had 3 felony warrants out. He had lost everything. He had nothing left. And he overdosed in our house in front of his son.
Wow.
And But anyway, he said a couple months later, he still kept trying to pull his boots up and try to do what was right, and he couldn't. And he looked at me and said, I can't do it anymore. I can't. I cannot do it. And I had even gone to the police station and said, this is where he's at. Please come and get him.
Right.
Please save my child. Well, with the court systems and the overcrowding of jails and everything, he was out in 6 days on 3 felony warrants.
Wow. And as you're talking and sharing this story, which thank you again so much, it's crazy that we really have put this pressure on a court system
Exactly.
to solve a medical condition. And that's some of this insanity that we're living in, that there's no other disease out there that we've asked the court system to solve.
Exactly.
So thankfully a lot of court systems and justice system have really stepped up and tried to do things differently and have recognized that, you know, that this is a disease, and our health, I mean, with with drug courts and mental health courts, I mean, they're making changes, and you know, they're doing some good work, but ultimately a disease needs to be treated in the way that other diseases need to be treated, with long-term support. That's fortunate that he was able to have 9 months of sobriety at one point in time, and because all of that he learned at that point isn't lost. He still gained some time, and for 9 months he was alive, and you know, got him to the next thing. And now he's coming up on 2 years of sobriety. And your youngest son, you said, made it into recovery a little bit earlier than him. Your daughter, where is she at now? I know you said she lives in Wisconsin. How's she doing?
My daughter still continued to have health issues, and she got engaged, and I lost my mother in November. And my mother had 4 grandkids, and 3 of them were mine.
Oh, okay.
And my daughter was the only granddaughter. And, you know, her and my mom just had this unique relationship. It changed my daughter's life. She came home. She sang beautifully at the funeral. She came home and went back home and just decided she was going to die. She couldn't live anymore. And she locked herself in a room, I guess, for days and didn't eat. She was skin and bones and everything. And she said, one night, she said she heard my mom's voice just as clear as all get out. I know it sounds crazy, but it transformed my daughter. And that was in November. Okay. And she is absolutely wonderful. She's off of 9 medications for health issues, anxiety, depression, bipolar, everything in the world she was on. And she's not on one medication. She stopped smoking. She gave she's like, I'm done. And she leads worship now. And she is getting married on the anniversary of their dad's death in May. To watch your 3 children get their driver's license, get their children back, get homes, get married. And I started finally understanding it wasn't anything I did.
Right.
It was trauma. Yes. And everything started clicking. The one thing I can tell families, don't be silent. You know, if you have to go to meetings to learn about your children or your brother or your sister or your mother or your father's addictions, then do it. But don't die in the silence of shame and regret and guilt. Learn how to heal to help your family members also heal.
Well, thank you so much. This has been so helpful. I'm sure that there's somebody out there that has been struggling, and you being willing to speak up and share your story really, I know will help folks, because you are able to share how it is possible, and also that, you know, it's not easy, that there's difficult times, and being able to continue trying and continuing to you know, there's ups and downs, but continuing to move through it, and then look at life today.
It's priceless. I mean, our tears, in their tears of joy, the tears have been turned to complete, oh my gosh, I cannot believe we survived this, but by the grace of God and 12 steps and recovery houses and a recovery home, everything
Mhm.
helped us do that. And I am so thankful for the journey. It was horrible, but the reward is absolutely priceless. It is.
Absolutely. So if you could just share, a couple words of wisdom of somebody who's struggling out there with a family member, what would you say to them? Somebody that's in that dark place, what would you say?
Educate yourself. Because I know I would have done things different if I knew now if I knew back then what I know now. I know I could have handled a lot of things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And but don't be silent.
Mm-hmm.
Surround yourself. Like I said, I the stigma that it carries is everybody has somebody in their family or someone that is close to them, someone they know, someone that has been affected by this horrible disease. And don't be silent. Find help, find love, find somebody that can help you walk through it. If you believe in the Lord, then find somebody who can help pray with you, or, just an ear to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
And just don't walk it alone either. Don't let the addict walk alone, and don't let yourself walk alone.
Well, thank you so much. Those are great words to live by. And that education, and there are so many more resources and support groups and so much more information today than there were even 15 years ago.
Yes.
So recovery is possible, and
Yes.
you and your family are really a great example of what the world can be for people in recovery today.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do you believe that